Hello and welcome to the FinanceFeeds podcast series. In episode 3, I'm joined by a very special guest, Ron Finberg from Capitec. Hello, Ron.
Do you have a little music that goes on before your...
We do indeed, yes. Yeah. We do. It gets edited in afterwards.
Okay, sweet.
Very nice. So, Ron, as I'm sure everybody who's listening knows, Ron and I go back a very long way. We've worked together for many years and actually have sometimes shared opinions and sometimes very different opinions. And that's really what podcasts are all about.
I think it's more of the latter, but we'll find that out.
We will indeed. So you've been at Capitec for quite some time now. So, there must be some issues that need to be got out there, really.
So I got here in the beginning of the year. Capitec is a technology services company where we service the financial industry. So I guess officially we're fintech, but in Israel there's a lot of technology companies. So it was having worked for different types of companies, I had this interest to be involved with a technology company. So I get to do that over here.
Yeah, I'm fully with you on that. As you know, having grown up in the financial technology sector, fully with you on it. But I'm sure you see all sides. You see the technology provision side, but you also see you going inside the company and seeing what the regulators are looking for in terms of reporting. You're also seeing how ready the brokerages are, and some of them, as I make myself quite clear, being very opinionated on this, some are more organised and are better, have better respect for regulations than others, and they're more geared up to actually realise that there's a value proposition in having technology to do reporting rather than just muddling through without spending the technology, ending up spending more in the long run.
Well, I think, Andrew, you have to look at it. What's the goal when it comes to regulation and what you're trying to do with it. So in Capitec, obviously, we have our Captivate product, which is for helping brokers, asset managers, etc., being able to help them deal with their regulatory reporting for EMIR, MiFID II, ASIC, and soon to be MiFID II. But a lot of what's taking place in general in compliance is there's a lot of data that people or the regulators are requiring people to be able to provide. So it's not necessarily this issue of people not wanting to be compliant or not being compliant. It's a matter of how do you provide that information.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think there are, you go to institutional orientated centres like London or New York or the futures sector in Chicago, where they're very technologically astute. There's a big fintech sector.
No, I don't think anyone's really technology astute. I think it's just you want to know how things work. Because here's an example. I was on the train a while back and I was talking to this guy next to me. And he said he was a programmer. So I said, what language are you doing? Especially in Israel, you're going to get probably a lot of .NET or Java, and the guy says he's a COBOL programmer. So I immediately asked him, so you're working for a bank or a telecom company? Because they're the only ones that are using the language from the 70s.
It is indeed, yeah.
So he laughed at that, but he said, yeah, I work at a bank. And then he told me a story. He said, listen, I use COBOL, we're at the bank, but one of our competitors decided, you know what, we got to make changes. We got to update everything. They spent millions and millions of dollars using an updating language, updating everything. They turned it on and nothing worked. So for 3 hours, no one could use their ATMs. They did it after hours, so at least the branches didn't get shut down. But it was a total disaster. And then the CTO basically said, "Let's pull the plug on the whole thing." So and then they went back to their COBOL-driven technology that they're still using. That we used 35 years ago, and they're still using now. So I think I think people are trying to, as you widen all the different things you're doing, it's not a matter of can you update things or be this really good technology savvy. I think it's just a matter of how do you get from A to B. If you need to make your ATMs work correctly, if you need to do technology reporting, if you need to do settlement, with hundreds of customers and things like that, you need to know what system works. So it's not always going to be the best level of technology because it's not necessarily tested as well.
I find it remarkable that that's still the case. If you look at some of the recent trouble that the banks have got themselves in, it's not just regulatory trouble for fixing the LIBOR rates, it's actually retail technology systems that they're using for their whole branch networks, as you say, like ATMs failing, salary records, automated salary records failing and people not getting their salaries in the bank account. And the banks are being fined for this. It's far more expensive for them to be fined than to have their technology modernized. I mean,
I don't know if that's true though. I think you're right. In the bigger case, getting fined $10 million is going to be. But I think smaller companies like, okay, I'm going to get a fund. Get a $50,000 fine.
Yeah, if it's a small fund. Yes, yeah, if it's a small fund. I'm talking about big institutions like Barclays, but not their retail, not their electronic trading divisions, their actual banking division. And then you have exactly the old COBOL system. I'm sure that I could find at home a Bakelite box with a 10-2 bayonet connector and some old infrastructure that I used to use 25 years ago when I was working on bank trading desks. And in those days, all those middleware systems and all of those particular types of infrastructure were all in COBOL and C++ and things like that. They're still using this technology today, just not the hardware. The software is the same.
Yeah, because if it works, it works. Like, what's interesting when people say you have to be technology savvy and update things, I don't necessarily believe that's true to a full extent. I mean, you need stuff that works. So I think if you look at where a lot of money is going in terms of financial institutions, probably the largest proportion is going towards cybersecurity, because that's a matter of like, okay, if they steal your information, then you're you can run into all sorts of different problems. They could ransom it. They could do ransom against you. They could tip the regulators that they stole it, and then the regulators will start squeezing you against it. So that's not necessarily an internal issue. That's an external, like, how do you protect your information?
Well, there was a robbery last week, wasn't there? Tesco Bank was drained of millions by a cyber attack just a week or so ago, and that's the sort of thing which, again, this is a thing which I don't understand. In 2001. I was involved in a project with a company called Macrovision, which at the time they were making encryption for disks, because back then they were using a lot of disk software in banks and in electronic trading institutional desks, and it was to encrypt them to stop people internally stealing the data off the disks. This technology is not new. This was 16 years ago. Yet now everyone's gone away from the actual hardware, and it's all cloud hosted. But then you hear 16 years after this encryption technology has been invented, the emptying of the whole Tesco Bank database and 15-20 million gone. This is the modern style of bank robbery.
But now we have so a lot of that technology doesn't scale as well as we'd like it to.
That's
so
right.
It does leave vulnerabilities. I think the biggest thing is just when you have a Tesco or a big bank and you have 100,000 people working there, that's a lot of points of contact that you can put some sort of malware or connect to.
Yes, that's for sure.
So I think, but I think the point of saying that it's a lot of the basic things and how do you make stuff work is that I think a lot of the RegTech, when you hear about just generally fintech and RegTech and just technology and finance, it's a lot of these, like, people talk about these cutting edge stuff like artificial intelligence and natural and language processing, things like that. But if you look at where those items are actually being implemented, it's not on these cutting edge things. If you look at, for example, so we're doing, what we do, I don't want to talk too much about what we're doing. So what we do is we do a very basic thing. We take database, we take files, and we take trade files, and they could be an SQL or whatever database language, and we basically we take it, we reformat it, we put in the logic into to reform that information to create a regulatory report.
Yeah.
So you send us one report, and we manipulate that and turn that into a EMIR or MiFID II type of report. So it's not cutting edge cutting edge technology. What we're trying to do is we're saying, okay, if there's 20 different types of companies, they all have different types of file formats. But we want to be able to make it easier for them to work. So we're going to send us your basic information. We're not high tech. It doesn't have to be high tech stuff. We can do security. We'll spend as much as we can on to make the connection to the software very secure. But in terms of the actual underlying conversion of it, it's not this high tech stuff. It's just a matter of a lot of inputting. How do you map A to B to become B? So that's one aspect where it's kind of like a low tech type of solution that's very important for financial companies.
Right, but I think you're in an advantageous position, because I think you're kind of being modest about it being at that level. But the thing is, RegTech companies this is now the age of the RegTech, and it's starting in boutique technology providers like Capitec, like Mapis Platis, like Abide Financial, like
Those are compliance companies.
They're compliance companies.
Corvus is a technology.
That's a technology company. However, they've gone down the route of regulatory, of reporting and that kind of thing. Now, the banks, the big institutions, some of them having huge institutional platforms like Barclays with Barc's platform, have got, and UBS, they have internal technology divisions, and they've had them for years and years and years. They're very, very corporate in their way of operating. And I remember them in the early 90s, and they're still very similar to they are in structure to how they were then. But the thing is, this industry, in terms of the electronic trading industry and the smaller fintech businesses who are adopting your kind of consultancy service and technology services, are poised in a position where this can lead the way for the institutional companies to modernize themselves and take on more of a bespoke approach.
But who said they're not really modern? I mean, a lot of people will talk about, all these fintech companies are disrupting the banks. But, Adam Bank or some others, they have online banks or mobile banks. And that's pretty cool. But that stuff's existed for years. I remember when, Bank of America, maybe 15 years ago, for a while, you could take a picture. You could take a picture on I think the iPhone 1, they had an app, you could take a picture of a check.
That's right.
Of a check, and then you don't have to deposit it.
That's right. No, this is right. Banks like Bank of America and certain British banks,
but it's around. It's not just.
It is around, but it's very, very region specific. It's not. If in our business, there's a lot of companies, retail brokerages who use services in Cyprus for their international banking, and they're taking deposits from all over the world, whether it's customer deposits, whether it's operating capital or paying suppliers. Those banks are stuck in the 1970s, and they keep blocking everything, and they don't have modern compliance technology. They have no way of checking things, and instead they just block the accounts. This is extremely detrimental to many businesses, and they could adopt regulatory technology to actually help that work.
That's true, and I think one of the areas specifically RegTech, fintech RegTech that is very interesting for banks is in terms of fraud detection.
Yes.
Where you're able to now, what happens if you get a phone call? If you take a trip and you do something you haven't done a trip to Asia in years or ever. And then the first day you're there, you get a phone call and said your card's has been canceled because it's been blocked because you have irregular charges.
Yeah, that's right.
That's fine. But you know what? I've already booked the hotel. I've gone to the restaurant. I've made 3 payments before they ever call me up.
Not always.
That's why those type of things should happen in real time. So
but they don't.
Why do I need someone to call me? It should be through my or SMS.
It should be.
That is an area where there's some really cool things coming out.
Yeah, but this needs to happen because even Lloyds Bank in England, which is an excellent quality bank, they are up to date with many things, and they're very open to modern international business. But they will keep if you have a business which has a lot of international transactions and the CEO and the directors travel a lot, they will keep blocking the cards all the time, and you have to spend 20 minutes on hold explaining something. Then they're going to ask you a dumb question like, what was the last transaction you've made for security? They're going to say something like, somebody just deposited this much into your corporate account. Who was it? And you're actually calling to ask them that question. They say you haven't passed security, goodbye, and then you've got to go back on hold again. This is really old-fashioned.
But what I'm saying is that's an area where you're using these advanced technologies, like in the artificial intelligence, to be able to review the different credit card histories. That's something where banks want to adapt, and there is interest for that type of technology. Where the hesitation is how do you scale it? Is this something that can actually work when you have, I know it works if I have 150 clients, but what if I'm, this massive bank and I have 5 million clients and they're all using credit card charges? Can that technology be able to recognize and do that? And in truth, a lot of it's untested.
I'm sure it can. Here's an example away from the banks. This is why I'm sure, when I used to work on server deployment programs for trading desks in banks, they were worldwide. This was years ago. They were connected internally within Britain or America to each other via cable connections. No fiber optics in those days. They were 10-based bayonet connectors, but they would do then satellite links to other countries. Now, the security was quite good, but the point is the actual identification of client process has not evolved at all. Now you have all these problems with blocking, and people can't run the businesses. You can't pay your suppliers. Imagine if you're a retail forex company in Cyprus and your customers make withdrawals. You can't pay the withdrawals because the Bank of Cyprus blocked the account for some arbitrary reason. It doesn't have the technology to actually identify what it is.
Right.
Then you've got all your name all over Forex Peace Army that you're blocking.
Right. Okay. Fine.
And then the bank won't listen
but
to
what's
you.
what's the solution to that?
The solution is right. So this is the thing.
So this solution, but that. So there are solutions that are that are doing things like that, but those companies need to prove that they're scalable.
Yes.
And they also have to prove that it could be either something that a bank deploys, that they just license the technology and they deploy it themselves, because the bank doesn't have to share their information with a cloud-based company, or it's in a way that it gets anonymized, where the fintech company doesn't see that information. So I think that's right now something that a lot of banks and where a lot of startups are kind of getting a better understanding of what's the demand from the banks. And I think for a while it's like, oh, we're just going to keep this really cool technology, it's going to do fraud detection, and then they struggle and say, why is no one deploying my product?
Yeah.
But where the issue is they have to understand these banks have rigorous demands. They want to know, how is it being, how do I deploy it? How do I know this information is secure, et cetera, and
right.
I know it can scale. And those are the type of questions that startups and RegTech companies really need to be answering.
Well, they can do it either way, because all those large, if you go to Canary Wharf, all those large banks that conduct all their electronic order flow from their interbank order flow have their own massive development teams and support teams, and they everything's in house. However, they also outsource certain aspects of it to companies like Pricewaterhouse, Accenture, all their solution architecture.
Yeah, no, but that's not. It's
but there's none of it gets leaked.
It's outsourced. No, but it's different. That's an outsourced work that's being deployed within the bank.
That's
within
correct. They put the actual consultants in the bank.
Right.
Yes, they do.
And the service and technology is being deployed within the bank. So it's a different.
Right.
So that's something that banks are comfortable with. Now it's a matter of how do I, just general question. Companies have to say, how can I produce a product that is not necessarily deployed by a bank, because you want to be something that you control and then you can scale it and it's easier to make changes with, but I'm also able to deal with the security on that side.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you look at the ASIC, the Australian regulator, this is, in my opinion, a possibility that they could use this type of system for banks on the regulatory and noticing irregularities.
You mean the surveillance system?
Yes, that's for trading. System.
It
notices irregularities and catches them for irregularities and compliance. It's a real-time.
Yeah, but that's a different type of surveillance. You use surveillance for fraud detection for credit cards.
I think that could translate to something which could manage a massive customer base and for example, Bank of Cyprus. That's just, I'm being harsh on them because they really are causing a lot of trouble.
You lost your ATM card with them or something?
No, but I know lots of brokerages that have been forced out of using them, and then they've had to go to third-tier banks, and that's exposed them to having their account cracked by hackers and money stolen, because Bank of Cyprus is so old-fashioned in its operation. It doesn't understand the modern trading industry. So
but that's a tiny bank.
But they're in a place where there's 180
It might be
brokers.
big, but it might be large in your industry, but it's a very small bank. It's a regional bank.
It's a regional bank.
Typically, it works like this. You have the top tier banks create their technology.
That's right.
The next tier will start seeing what they're doing, and then either they'll make a decision to build that technology themselves, or they will find a vendor to use that. And then once you have the second tier and the first tier already adopted it, then the third tier companies, which are these smaller regional banks, then they'll finally start adopting that information.
Yes.
So take for example, the easiest example is when it comes to FX trading. So FX trading, you have these proprietary, single dealer platforms that everybody's got. And then, but now you can be, Joe Schmo Bank in wherever, as long as you have a decent currency. You can be let's say in Norway, you could be the fifth largest bank in Norway, and you don't have to build your own system. You go to Frister's or Integral, and you just use their white label product, and then you say, oh, now I'm a dealing desk. I'm a dealing market. I can make a market now in the Krona.
And you can take a multi-dealer platform.
Right. So that's typically how the life cycle works, and we just haven't gotten that life cycle with enough of these technologies.
But I think it has to happen, because the reason I'm singling out this particular bank is because they are a small bank, but a disproportionate amount of their business is from electronic trading firms which conduct business all over the world and have to deal with client assets on an electronic basis. And the point is that they will block people's. I know that they block brokerage accounts all the time, and they don't have any understanding.
Okay, so then the opportunity isn't necessarily for bank of Cyprus to improve their RegTech to handle it. I think the difference is how can another bank go and
that's right. It needs
take
to.
that.
Yes, that's exactly what needs to happen. That's right. And it could be an online. It could even be in a small place like that where there's a lot of online business. It could be, that what's that German bank?
Feeder.
Yes, Feeder bank. Something like that could actually have a separate entity. Or,
yeah, but see, so Feeder's an interesting example because it's not just Feeder. They're part of not just the banking. They also have other aspects that they're trying to put within their features where these banking APIs, they want to make it easier for just digital to digital connections to be much better.
You know what I'd like to see is companies like Dukas Copy, Saxo Bank and Swissquote, who've got banking licenses, actually start a banking service specifically for the electronic trading sector to have corporate operational capital bank accounts and client bank accounts. I actually had a meeting with Saxo Bank about this in London a few weeks ago because I suggested this subject and they actually called me in to speak about it. And they have currently 3 components. They have Saxo Bank, which is the bank license.
Right.
They have their fintech and prime brokerage division, which is a prime brokerage which is a non-bank and bank aggregator. They've got CurrentX, EBS, all the non-bank and the bank aggregators, prime of prime. And then they have their Saxo Payments division, which is a B2B payment service, but not a banking facility. They could actually use those 3 things to operate an actual banking system where a forex brokerage could have a corporate bank account with them for their operating capital and for their client assets. And I think that would bring these particular companies who have gone down the banking license route a massive amount of low-risk business. As long as they can ascertain the capital base is big enough, they've got the technology, they understand this fintech business properly enough and the compliance business properly enough to operate that properly.
Makes sense. But one of the other things we haven't really talked about, just in terms of fintech in general, where do you think is like the hottest in demand, one of the hottest in demand fields for using technology in big banks right now?
I think certainly international cross-border security is one of them.
So that's all defensive. Now, you have to think offensive. What's the problem with banks right now? They're not making, the margins are going down.
The margins are down. Also, that's right. So here's an offensive thing.
So if you're a fintech company, you have to think about this. A bank, your customers' margins are going down. So you could either do 2 things. You can either give them a product to help them lower their expenses, which, let's say a company like us at Capitec, we're saying, here, license our product, it's going to be cheaper for you. That's one way of doing it. The other way is saying, which very few companies are doing, and they're going to the banks and they're saying, here, we're going to give you a product that's going to help you increase instead of saving expenses, increase your revenues. So I think a lot of the smaller banks are doing this right now with like the online lending and how to make it easier for them to do online lending. But another area, which I've been speaking to people and seeing a lot of it, and I think it's pretty cool, is using big data to do sales. So they're saying, okay, Citibank has got 10 million clients. I don't know, probably more than that. Let's say they get 10 million clients, and they're able to use the big data to review those type of clients as to know what type of products are they buying or not buying.
Now that's more like the thing they should be doing.
Right. I think then by doing that, I know Santador is huge in this stuff. They were one of the leaders to really get it, to really apply big data for their whole sales structure. So now when you start doing this, you say, okay, what are our top sold products? Who are those sold to? And then we start using this data to help your sales process. Then it's
that's right.
You're helping the bank. So that's actually not, but it's less of a fintech issue. It's more of a sales tech.
It is sales tech. It's aggregation of data to find the right. You see, what you're doing is automating the type of finding new customers for specific products by doing that, and retaining existing customers.
Right. And that type of stuff, like I know in the retail broker space, like Optimo, they do help.
Yeah, they do, and so does Tradency now as well,
and like C-Pattern. But that's another area that I think is like people are, when you're looking at fintech companies, you have to understand, what does your customer want? They want to save money, they want to make things easier, and they want to make more money. So
if you go to a retail branch, but many banks have got retail branch networks that are failing because it's an expensive real estate business. They've got old-fashioned methodologies at a branch level only, and you have people there who are almost have a civil servant mentality. They don't have a modernised approach. They have set up a remit, what they're allowed to offer to customers, and that's about it.
Right. So now if
you've got big data, you can actually you can eradicate all of that branch level stuff, all the barriers, and only target specific businesses that are relevant to that particular product and retain them by using big data.
Right. So I think this is something that I haven't really heard anyone talk about outside of company. I've heard banks tell me that this is what they're working on. I haven't heard outside people saying, "Oh, we want to start focusing on banks." I think there's a large there's a large opportunity there.
I think there is as well, and I think they are also they're going to look at this kind of automation because blockchain is now being used for automated ledger distribution, distributed ledgers. So that's one aspect of internal operations that could rid most of the back office operations. But ridding them of branches and getting them off branch level incompetent, if you want to call it that, and high expense and low revenues. Big data and channeling it towards the right customers globally is a very good step in the right direction, I would say. So excellent. Very nice to speak to you again, Ron. Nice to be here. And see you next week in London.
Yeah, thanks.
All the best.
Yeah.
That's Ron Finberg from Capitec. Thanks for joining us. Speak to you next time on the Finance Feeds podcast. Goodbye.